Okay, welcome everyone to the Voices of the River webinar series by the Even Load Catchment Partnership. I'm Jennifer Lanham from the Cotswold National Landscape.
And I'm Anne Miller from the ECP, one of the founders of the ECP and a citizen scientist based in Charlbury.
And today we are privileged to welcome presenter Mary Colwell. Mary is a successful author, producer, and campaigner for nature with an impressive list of awards behind her, highlighting her dedication to the conservation of the natural world. Most recently, Mary founded and is currently director of the charity Curlew Action, and she is chair of the government-supported Curlew Recovery Partnership England. Mary's passion and advocacy for nature also extends to education, and she is spearheading a campaign for natural history in GCSEs for England. Today's presentation is called Hope in a Time of Crisis. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Mary.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll just, excuse me, I'm going to cough, share my screen. If I can work out how to do that. Share, okay. Here we go. You can see my screen?
No, yep, there it comes.
There we go. Okay, and I'll play from the start. All good?
Great.
Okay, so I just want to put up this beautiful Japanese painting here. It's very misty, it's very stark, and it is a representation, a Japanese representation of a word which we don't have a translation for in English. We don't have anything that's very similar. This is a demonstration of Ma, M-A. Now, Ma is a recognition that spaces are as meaningful as solidity. So the space in between those trees, the space around it, the sort of merging of real and not there, is really, really meaningful. It speaks as much as the solid stuff does. And in fact, space gives meaning to solidity. That's the idea of Ma. And this is a beautiful painting that represents that. So it's given its mysterious, it's rather yearning kind of feel because it has these spaces in it. So Ma is a very important concept in Japan. And people feel it's very important to understand what spaces are saying to you, what gaps are saying to you. And in fact, the word for a fool in Japanese is manuke, is someone who cannot live with gaps, who doesn't recognize the importance of gaps. And so when this picture started to be beamed around the world, I think we all understood the meaning of Ma very well. So this is the sycamore, or was the sycamore gap tree. And this tree held it wasn't just a tree in a landscape. There's lots and lots of trees in landscape photographs. This particular tree in a landscape seemed to signify so much. It seemed to signify to us dignity, aloneness, resilience. It seemed to dignify individuality. There was all sorts of meanings that individuals put onto that tree in that beautiful shape. It's a very pleasing tree in a very pleasing landscape. Something about the whole composition of that picture seemed to say something to us about what it is to be human. And so when this happened, it caused absolute grief and outrage. And that picture was utterly shocking. When we all woke up to that in the morning, there was a complete sense of national shock. And I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say that many people were shocked into a sense of grief about that. And it showed that human destructive feelings can be as damaging as anything. It was an act of spite. It was an act of vandalism. It was someone wanting to say something very hard and very vicious about the world. And that's as dangerous as a chainsaw. And so the felling of the sycamore gap tree spoke to us of loss on many different levels. Loss of that tree, on a wider sense, loss of the natural world, the destruction of the natural world, loss of the ability of the natural world to speak to us about our own human condition. It spoke of loss on many different levels. And I got the same sense as when I saw this picture a while ago of a bulldozer destroying the habitat, the home of an orangutan, and the orangutan was trying to fight the bulldozer off, while a man with a dart gun stood below, trying to dart it to get rid of it. It was it is a horrible, horrible image. And that sense of helplessness that we all felt when we saw the sycamore gap tree was the sense of helplessness that I envisaged when I saw this. And actually, the sense, did I put it in? Yeah, of just yesterday. I don't know if you managed to come across this, but yesterday, the RSPB and BirdLife International produced a paper that said that the slender-billed curlew, this beautiful curlew, one of 8 species of curlew around the world, is now 99.6% certain to be extinct, i.e. it's extinct. And it's the first mainland European species to go extinct for generations. The last European species to go, I think, was the great auk. But the mainland species was far beyond time back from that. So we have lost our first mainland European species, the slender-billed curlew. It was, as I say, a species of curlew that nested in the steppes of the Asian steppes in Russia and so on, and then it flew down to the Mediterranean area and spent the winter down there. And it looks like the major cause of its demise was hunting, although there was quite a lot of agricultural intensification around its breeding grounds. But it's hard to believe that was the only thing, because the breeding grounds are very extensive, and there seems to be still a lot of ground around that where they could have nested, but they were shot in large numbers in the Mediterranean. So we now have lost 2 of the 8 species of curlew that once graced the earth, the slender-billed curlew and the Eskimo curlew, which disappeared from North and South America. Last confirmed sighting, I think, was in the 80s, might even have been 75. But 2 species of curlew gone, 6 left. All the other 6 are in varying degrees of peril, including our own Eurasian curlew. So this again, this feeling of it's like an empty seat on the bus next to you. Suddenly they're not there anymore. They're just not there anymore. They've gone. And this, can you make out this lovely, lovely creature here? There's a curlew sitting right at the middle of the bottom of the screen. It's taken on a very long lens, and from somebody long way away, but he was keeping an eye on it. That is the very last breeding curlew in County Kerry in Southern Ireland. There's only 1 pair left, and that's it. And it comes back every year. I don't actually know whether it produces any chicks. Most curlew in Ireland don't, and I'll do a little bit more about that later. But that is the last fragment of hope in County Kerry, a county which used to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of breeding curlew. So that's the sense and of loss, but it isn't just a loss of a physical thing, is it? As with the slender-billed curlew, you lose part of the sound of the earth as well. And let's just remind ourselves what that sound is. Hard not to hear that sound, and all sorts of feelings and emotions come to the surface, and everybody smiles when they hear it. It's a wonderful, bubbling sort of evocation of spring, and it's a beautiful sound, which has now gone pretty much apart from 1 bird pair in County Kerry. And the destruction is really all at our hands, isn't it? And it's very hard to get away from that. We plough the land, we build on it, we develop it, we intensively farm it, we drain it, we put livestock on it, we walk over it, we do our leisure activities on it, we let our dogs run over it. Everything we do, pretty much as human beings, happens on the land. And so it's hard to get away from the hard reality that the world's wildlife is thinning out because of our activities. And it's hard to face that, isn't it? It's hard to come to terms with the fact that we're not be driving that tractor, but we're damn well involved in everything that tractor's there for. So even though we can feel, oh, that's terrible, we're part of it, all of us. Everybody is part of it. Because of our highlight, the way we live our lives, the way we move around, the way we do everything that we do, our expectation of what the earth can give us puts these very, very heavy demands on the planet. And that's what we see when the slender-billed, when the Eurasian curlew, when the orangutan can't survive anymore, and the fragments that are left. But you know, that sense of grief can't be paralyzing. And I think I'm really feel strongly about this, that we can't let a sense of everything slipping away stop action. We have to use that power, those emotions, those deep-seated and sometimes really overpowering emotions, to power us through to something better. And those of us of a certain age will remember the Save the Whale movement in the 70s, and how Greenpeace, the little boat like the Greenpeace inflatables, would go out and put themselves between a whaling ship and a whale and draw up the world's attention to the slaughter that was going on for the great whales. And the Save the Whale movement showed the courage and the anger and the sort of activism of people. And it brought the world's attention to a topic which most of us didn't really think much about, I don't think. You know, we don't see whales very often. If you don't live on the sea or very close, then even if you live by the sea, I doubt you see whales very often. They were mysterious creatures. Underwater filming hadn't really advanced very much. We certainly didn't know much about them. And the bravery and the sort of activism of Greenpeace brought them back to us. But so did Roger Payne, the scientist who then put a microphone under the water and said, listen to this, whales sing, listen to this. And suddenly we realize these are singing beings. They communicate under the water and across an ocean. And their voices were haunting and they were beautiful. And we were just harpooning them. It was an extraordinary thing. And so the Greenpeace Save the Whale movement was phenomenally successful, combined with the sort of rising of our awareness and understanding of what a whale actually is. And so it is possible to turn the grief of loss into the activism of hope. And so we've heard the curlew calling earlier. And so I thought I would just give you just a little bit of a taste of what I did as an individual, just as not within any organization at all, just as an individual. And I had a sort of love for curlews. I don't know why I love them. When people ask me why curlews, I don't know. I don't know why. Why not? Look at them, they're gorgeous, aren't they? They are graceful and they're beautiful, and they live in wild and wonderful places, and they bind the land to the sea, and they walk around in mud, and they walk through wildflowers, and they sing this most beautiful and haunting and wonderful sound. And everybody loves the call of the curlew. And that call was a siren call to me. I can't let this thing disappear. And because I worked at the BBC Natural History Unit, I was beginning to get a lot of information coming through from Southern Ireland, just how serious the situation was there, with a 98% decline in curlews since the 1990s, from about 5,000 to 8,000 breeding pairs to 98 since the 1990s. That's shocking. And then it turned out it wasn't just Ireland, that Wales has lost nearly 90%, Northern Ireland 90%, southern England has lost. We're not sure, but there were certainly a lot more, and now it's down to 500 pairs. I'm going to come on to that. So there was loss of curlews everywhere, and I thought, what's going on? So I decided to take 2 months out of my work, and I walked from the west coast of Ireland, through Wales and through England, and ended up on the Wash. There I was at the Wash, sort of 6.5 weeks later, having walked through where the curlew still breeds, having walked through where it's now fallen silent, having talked to scientists and activists and conservationists, but also bird watchers and poets and writers and farmers and anybody, to say, what does the curlew mean to you and why is it disappearing? And when I got there on the East Coast all those weeks later, look at that face. Don't I look, I thought, I know what's going on now. I've worked it out. It's just going to be a matter of telling people what the problems are and it will be solved. It doesn't work like that. Let me tell you, life isn't that simple, as I'm sure you know. I wrote my book, Curlew Moon, just a little shameless plug there, which details the journey and how I find out what was happening. And this is what I did find, that yes, we are losing over 5,000, 6,000 birds a year, that we've lost over half of the breeding curlews in 20 years. And in fact, it's way over, it's about 65% in the UK. It's become the most pressing bird conservation priority. You can see where the grey things are there on the map. That's where curlews have either disappeared from, and the curlew then, as you can see from the graph, it's a bit hidden by, I think, the sort of zoom pictures, but the graph relentlessly going down to zero. And so I worked out that the Eurasian curlew has probably got very few years left in which to turn this around. And the problem is, as we said, curlews nest on the ground, and that makes them highly vulnerable. The eggs and the chicks, highly vulnerable to whatever it is that we do on the ground. So seeing sites like this, a curlew not far off fledging, is incredibly rare and increasingly rare across the country. And the problems, it turns out, are the conversion from old-fashioned extensive agriculture on the left to intensive, rapid turnaround agriculture and uniform landscapes on the right. So we used to just do the harvest time in the summer, that by which time the curlews had gone through laying eggs and chicks, and the chicks were old enough to run away. Now silage in the grasslands is cut probably from mid to late April onwards these days, and every 8 weeks or so, and the curlews cannot survive in that. Also, the uniform landscapes mean they can't find places to hide. They're very obvious to predators, and far fewer insects. Mention predators. There's a massive increase in predators in the UK over the last 40 years, again tied to the way we use our land, and also, thank goodness, stopping of persecution of things like badgers and birds of prey. But what the net result is, we have a lot of what's called mesopredators, middle-sized predators, and they can eat all sorts of things, and dwindling curlew chicks are one of the things they eat. So predation pressure is big, land use change is huge, and we keep feeding predators with all our human food and our waste and that kind of thing. So we supplement their diet enormously by just the way we are. Another big problem I found was that there's a big call for more and more forestry, plantation forestry in particular, sort of cash crop forestry. And that's often planted across rough grassland, which is exactly the hotspots for where the waders like to nest, waders like curlew. And so the spread of plantation forestry is a major issue, particularly on the borders of Scotland. And of course, climate change, the big one that we all know about. And this year was a very bad year for flooding, and a lot of curlew territories were flooded out when the birds arrived. So the very late start breeding So when they did eventually manage to get down to breeding, if they lost that first clutch to predation, it was too late in the year to have another clutch. And a lot of nests were either drowned out or just failed because it was too wet and cold. So climate change is a big issue as well. And in fact, the BTO have shown their prediction for 2080, and look where curlews are just disappearing and getting thinner, if that prediction comes true. So curlews today find themselves embroiled in intensive farming, predators, development, forestation, shooting problems because they do quite well on grouse moors, which are managed for ground nesting birds, rewilding, renewable energy, Brexit, and climate change. I mean, talk about a list of issues that affect one bird. And you think, wow, that's a bit overpowering. You know, any one of those is enough to tackle. How can you begin to tackle all of them? And I can't go into the nuances of all these in the time that we have, but all of them have complicated, very detailed arguments around them. And it's quite hard to get your head around it all, to be honest. So my response was to say, well, I don't know, let's talk about it. My response was to say, I'm going to invite anybody and everybody to come and meet around the different nations. So top left, Ireland, bottom left, Scotland, top right, England, bottom right, Wales, and invited gamekeepers and scientists and bird watchers and conservationists and teachers and anybody, actually. And everybody who's interested in curlews, come and talk about it. And let's see if we can come up with some solutions. And each one of those meetings kick-started a program of activism. So the Ireland one started the Curlew Task Force, which turned into the Curlew Recovery Programme for Ireland. Working for Waders in Scotland boosted their curlew work. Top right, Slimbridge produced all sorts of things, including the Curlew Recovery Partnership and something called the Curlew Forum. And bottom right, the now increasingly active and increasingly efficient Curlew Wales, doing great work over in Wales. And I also started World Curlew Day on April the 21st. April the 21st was the day I set off on my curlew walk, but it's also the feast day of the lovely St. Beino. And St. Beino blessed curlews when he was a saint in the 6th century in Wales, because a curlew rescued his prayer book from the sea, apparently, so legend tells us. So I thought, what a lovely day. And his feast day is April the 21st. It's also the first date of laying eggs for curlews, average date in the UK. So all in all, April the 21st seemed like a good day to declare World Curlew Day. And that's all I did. I got my cousin to do the logo. I phoned up the major organisations and said, do you know what? April the 21st, World Curlew Day. Should we do something? And it's just grown from then. And World Curlew Day is just really growing in fun and connecting people. We held a meeting at 10 Downing Street to talk to policymakers and politicians. And King Charles, it was Prince Charles then, also loves curlews, and he held 2 symposia of his own. And if I'd known that I was going to be sitting next to Prince Charles, King Charles, nobody told me until the morning that I arrived, I would have made my tights match my skirt. But the fact is, I thought I'd be sitting at the back and nobody would notice. So note to people who organise things, please let your people coming know if they're going to be sitting next to the future king or not, because it's quite useful to know that information. Anyway, he's wonderful. He really was wonderful. He was so enthusiastic, so supportive, and he managed to instigate the Curlew Recovery Partnership England. And this is a roundtable of major organisations dedicated in some part to protecting curlews. And I'm the chair, and Ryan Burrell is the manager. And together we work very much on policy and advising DEFRA on policy for ground nesting birds. And everybody's involved in it, obviously. I'm not just me. Another thing that happened was a massive increase in curlew projects. There's far more now. On the ground projects, people starting to work, local groups springing up, but also scientific research and organizations running campaigns and doing their own projects. Out of that has come far more information on how curlews are moving. Lots and lots of tagging work has been happening. So now we know that curlews are such interesting migrants, and that in the winter, 60% of the birds you'll see on the Wash, or actually in the wet grasslands of the Severn and Avon Vales, will be from Finland and northern Germany. We are tied together in a big meta-population of the Eurasian curlew. So we need to work together as a Europeans who are fortunate enough to have this songster living with us, to all of us look after it. So the European network is really, really important. And that's something that Curlew Action is very, very keen on developing. And we've already started to do that. We've also finding that a lot of projects are using technology increasingly, like heat-seeking drones to find nests, electric fences to protect nests from predators. They're very, very common now around the country. Temperature loggers, nest cameras, and nest cameras showing us just that sheep can be actually quite a big issue in certain parts. They come, they nudge the curlew off the nest and eat the eggs because they need calcium. Apparently, who knows, but we think that's the reason. Temperature loggers also detect the temperature of the nest, and they can tell you a time when a nest was abandoned and probably predated, and whether it's the daytime, probably an avian predator, at nighttime, probably a mammal predator. And then the other thing that's happened is the growth of headstarting, which is where you take eggs out of the wild, collect them, bring them in, raise them in captivity, and you release the chicks at the age at which they've passed that danger point. So you raise them in safety, release them back into the wild. And a lot of the eggs come from airfields in England, military airfields, where the military did have a derogation to shoot curlews and destroy their eggs, because big birds like curlews are not great news when you've got aeroplane. But when this was discovered, WWT said, please, can we have those eggs? Don't destroy them, let us have them. And we can use them for headstarting projects. The military were unbelievably helpful. And so a lot of eggs now come from military airfields. And headstarting is growing and growing and growing in importance. And in fact, Curlew Action is holding an all-Europe headstarting workshop in February, to which everybody is invited. There's an Eventbrite, which I can certainly pass on. And please do come if headstarting is something that interests you. Those are the adult birds, well, nearly adult birds, kept in these pens, increasingly kept outside, and then they'll be taken to where they're going to be released. And it's such a privilege to be able to see them, because it's such a rare sight in the wild. And now there are more head-started birds being released than there are wild birds surviving in the wild. And there they are, just about to fledge. And they just let out of their box into a wildflower meadow, ready to go. And you can see them thinking, what the hell is this? And why isn't anybody brought me my dinner? So, but headstarting is really interesting, and there's lots to say about its success and whether it's working or not, and the problems and the good things that are coming out of it. But again, that's something for a very different session. But do join our webinar if you'd like to. So it is a special bird, the curlew. It has become, in the last few years, part of government policy, part of society. The national conversation is increasingly turning to icons like curlews. It's just risen and risen and risen in awareness. Doesn't mean to say we're winning the battle in terms of saving them, but at least we know a lot more about them, and we know what to do to save them. And the Curlew Recovery Partnership, just so that it's a bit confusing who does what, the Curlew Recovery Partnership, this round table of which I'm the chair, we do a lot of the species recovery programs, the managing of that, the advising ELMS and Natural England, and strengthening the ties with England and Wales and Northern Ireland and Scotland. So a sort of policy-led thing. Curlew Action we do a lot of outreach, awareness raising, community building, and education in terms of putting on webinars and podcasts and getting the big issues that are affecting wildlife out there. And we work with everybody from artists to singer-songwriters like David Gray, who is such a supporter of curlews. So I'll just play you a little bit of a song he wrote about curlews, song called The Ark. And it's a really beautiful song.
The arc of sound, it's the prism of the human heart, unspools the yearning. My feet are on that circular path, and I'm returning. Yeah, I'm returning, I'm back to the place I've never been. Eyes like two headlights in the fog, the slate wiped clean.
It's just the very start of it. It's very beautiful. And again, I can pass on the details of the CD that it's on.
Lost.
Oh, so we also, we also do a poetry and art competition through World Curlew Day. And we've had amazing entries from ages 8 to 93, people sending in their art and their poetry. Last year we did some cupcakes. They were extraordinarily wonderful. They didn't look anything like curlews, but they were just brilliant, and I would buy them. They were just fabulous. And so every year, and it's a way of getting everybody involved. You don't have to know about curlew biology and behavior. You don't have to be an expert on, ringing chicks. You don't have to be a scientist. You can just write a poem and be involved in raising awareness about them. So this is David reading. I hope you can hear it all right, because it's a bit quiet, but a poem that somebody wrote, and I thought it was very, very beautiful and very poignant.
Lost by Sarah Howden. I do not remember the curlew, but on certain pale winter afternoons I find the mudflats scattered with footprints, like carelessly dropped stars. I do not remember the curlew, only a handful of crumpled feathers, each one a liquid ribbon of mud, set against a faded pink sky, a cartography of longing. I do not remember the curlew, but sometimes, blown in by the tide, I hear a cry that swoops upwards like the outline of grief, the curve of a beak or a bird, more song than substance, soaring again towards the sun.
It's a beautiful poem, and that was just sent in to us for our World Curlew Day competition. That was read by David again. So you can see that you can get everyone involved, and there's a sense of helplessness comes if you think, well, I can't go and do anything. I'm not a conservationist and I don't have the training. And I think that's wrong to think that. I think we need to release this power of creativity and this surge of love for the natural world and how to express it. It's there in everybody, and all of us can be a part of it. And it's very empowering to sit down and write a poem or draw a picture and then just be part of that movement, be part of spreading the word. The other thing that we're doing is, this is, blimey, I think Europe was enough, but we're just organising the World Curlew Symphony. Somebody stop me because it's ridiculous. Take it. But it just seemed like an obvious next step. And that will hopefully be held next November. And it will look at all curlew species of the world. As I said, we've lost the slender-billed, we've lost the Eskimo, but we have another 6 to save. And we're going to do our damnedest to make sure they're protected. So it's all about building hope and building activity. And those who would transform a nation or the world cannot do so by breeding and captaining discontent, or by demonstrating the reasonableness and desirability of the intended changes, or by coercing people into a new way of life. They must know how to kindle and fan an extravagant hope. And that's from a guy called Eric Hoffer, who wrote a book called The True Believer, and he looked at mass movements. And he has summarized that to have a mass movement, you have to have hope. That's what you spread into your society, because people don't get out of bed just by being shouted at or made to feel guilty or or being argued with. They get out of bed because they hope they're going to find a better world and fight for a better world. And that's what I believe in, and that's why Curlew Action exists. And we need hope, because 50% of children can't identify a nettle, 75% can't name a robin, 80% don't know what a bumblebee is, 90% can't name a large white butterfly. And we need these kids, we need them to know more, because the future will belong to the nature smart, those individuals, families, businesses, and political leaders who develop a deeper understanding of the transformative power of the natural world, and who balance the virtual with the real. The more high-tech we become, the more nature we need. That was written in 2005. 20 years later, ain't that more true than ever? So we've got to give the next generation the knowledge, teach them what things are, and then through that, instill them with the hope. And through that, they will have the courage and the determination to turn around the mess, to be quite honest, that those of us of a certain age and before have made. So, GCSE in natural history, another campaign that I ran, took me 12 years to get the Conservative government to say yes. There it is, being announced in 2022 by Nadeem Zahawi. Do you remember those days? Wasn't that a long time ago? And quite a few secretaries of states and ministers later. Only it wasn't confirmed. Only it wasn't. They said yes, it was. And then they set the wheels in motion, but it was so slow, and there were people who objected to it, and it never made it through to the very final bit. It's called the public consultation before the general election was called. And then it's just gone back into limbo. And the Labour government have said, well, I don't know, we'll consider it. We're thinking about it. But it'll be part of a review and, blah, 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 dust in the air. And we're not back to square one, but we're back to fighting. So, that little face again, all smiley. Oh, it's fine. We're all going to sort it out. Like with the Curlews. It's not quite that simple, but I'm not giving up. And nor are all the wonderful people who are working alongside me. This isn't just me. The Curlews isn't just me. The GCSE isn't just me. By a long way, I'm now only one of huge numbers of inspirational and wonderful people who are helping push this forward. And I'm determined we'll get something. Whether we'll get a GCSE, I just don't know, but we'll get something. Because in the end, we will conserve only what we love, and we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught. That was said by the inspirational Senegalese environmentalist Baba Dioum back in 1968. I believe that. That's why I do what I do, and I'm sure that's why you do what you do. And I hope we will teach the world to love the planet again and save everything from curlews to butterflies to nematodes to landscapes. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was just inspirational indeed. And I'm in awe of your energy and the number of different dimensions of what you've pursued with curlews as a sort of icon for that whole nature conservation and as you say, taking education to try and bring hope. I'm going to ask if there are any people on the call who would like to ask a direct question first of all, and then there are questions I will go through with you from the chat.
Would you like me to stop sharing before that, or shall I leave the slide up?
Whichever you prefer. Do you prefer to be able to see people?
Yeah, why not?
Thank you. Would anybody come off invisible or off mute and ask a question? If so, by all means do so now. Otherwise, I will set to with some of the questions that we've got here. Just to start, we have Jennifer asking about Curlew Action. Do you work with farmer clusters to share knowledge on how they might improve habitat?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Curlew clusters. See, look, I'm not obsessed. Honestly, I'm not. Farmer clusters are amazing. And they were started actually by GWCT. I think that was the GWCT initiative. And they've grown and grown. And the idea of getting farmers together to discuss farming issues and how they can work together is to create a better landscape for wildlife is just inspirational. And of course, farmer clusters, we talk to farmers clusters. The Curlew Recovery Partnership couldn't do what it does without dealing with the clusters and the expertise and the knowledge of farmers and landowners, who really are people that, you know, once you have a farmer who knows their land. I know not every farmer is like this, but a lot of farmers are, and they know their land, they care about their land, and they just want to know the best way to do things. Farmers get a lot of bad press, and I've certainly found that many of them really want to do the right thing. So farmer clusters are essential.
And sort of following on from that, I'm curious about some of the things that you were saying about head starting and releasing these birds into the environment. And I wonder what sort of conditions do you need to have to be able to release successfully? I mean, obviously you can release anything anywhere, but what's the recipe for success working with farmers or landowners? What's the how big an area and what sort of habitat do they need to really flourish? I ask this so that we can be lobbying some of our local big estates who I know are interested.
I think it's a really, really interesting question, and it's a difficult one to answer because head starting is a big commitment. So it's easy to think, oh, great, we'll just breed some curlews and chuck them out there and it'll all be, but it isn't that. Head starting is very expensive. It's very time consuming. You need quite a lot of expertise to do it well. You need a lot of licenses. You can't do it without Natural England licenses. Also, rearing them is quite a detailed and complex thing. They can have all sorts of health issues if we don't get that right. And then you need to release them into suitable habitat. And the jury is out as to whether releasing them where there are already curlews existing, so they kind of bolster a local population, or whether you use them and go and seed new areas. All that's just being worked out at the moment. So I would say if you want to seriously think about head starting, please do join our webinar in February, and please encourage anybody interested in head starting to do that. They're even thinking about it. But also get in touch with the CRP, Curlew Recovery Partnership. Do that through me if you like, or just there's the website and hello@curlewrecovery.org, and we can help put you in touch with the right people. But there's no point rearing curlews to release them into landscapes that aren't fit for their survival. So if you're going to do head starting, you have to do habitat management. And habitat management has to be over scale, and it has to include, I'm afraid, predator control in today's landscapes. So there's a lot of big things to take on board, really, if you want to go down that road. Yeah.
Can I also ask you about dogs in here? What's your view of dogs?
Well,
Because
if I could turn around, you'd see my little Jack Russell all curled up asleep. So I love dogs and I love our dog. But I do know that, just letting them go and race around everywhere in meadows, on moors, in fields when it's the breeding season, it can be very, very disruptive. They may not damage the bird itself, but they might flush it off the nest, and then that opens it to predators. So I think Curlew Action does a sign that you can download from the website, or if you write to us, we'll post some out to you, and you can put them up. If you know you've got breeding curlew, just put them up and warn people to say, look, please keep your dogs on the lead around this area at this time. And people, can be really reasonable. Not everybody, obviously. There are some difficult people, but when you explain why it's really important, it's not everywhere. It's just where these birds need to breed. And in the winter as well, getting dogs to chase birds on the beach is really bad news. These birds, most of them long distance migrants, like the curlews, many of them come from Russia or from Finland. They arrive on our shores trying to find some food to survive the winter and build up for the next breeding season. And if they're constantly chased, they just get very out of condition very quickly. So responsible dog ownership is becoming vital because there's so many dogs in this country now, over 10 million. So we need to think about wildlife as well.
So switching to a slightly different area here, question about what can we, the average person, do to help push the natural history GCSE?
Oh, great. Yes. Write to your MP, whatever flavour they are, and say, please lobby the Department for Education to take the GCSE and push it through over that last hurdle. It's there ready. It needs to go to public consultation. It doesn't need to be part of the Francis Review, which is this big overall of review that the government's instigated for assessment and for education and assessment. If it goes into that, I think it'll get lost in the system. They just need to say yes. Just need to say, this one's ready to go. Let's push it over the line. So please lobby your MP, write to the Secretary of State, write to the Minister for Schools, just use your voice. And it's very easy to think that because you're an individual, no one will listen. I actually don't believe that. I know it's not true. I know people listen if you make a fuss. And in fact, so much that they used to call me that bloody woman in the Department for Education. And I take that as a badge of honour because that meant the message was getting through.
Brilliant. I love it. So I'm also aware that you mentioned lots of different parties who are involved in the Curlew Recovery Project, but I'm wondering about do you have any businesses involved? Because I'm thinking about where, from the point of view of, I remember years ago, people like Jordan's and other products, as it were, that wanted to support doing things, particularly with skylarks. But do you have similar things with curlews?
Yes, I wish I could. I wish I could crack that one, and I don't know how to do it. That's been on my list for so long, and if anybody can help me, I thought, well, maybe Waitrose would be nice because it's very wholesome, isn't it? And nice. Maybe they would like to sort of partner or sponsor Curlews and Curlew Action and our work. And we do need to get businesses on board, and then maybe something to do with travel and migration. I don't know. It's not really something that I'm very good at, that kind of thing. But if anybody would like to help me do that, I'm all ears.
It struck me that also the some of the manufacturers of machinery might be worth talking with as well, because as you identified, where so many of those machines are going through and not currently picking up on any of the opportunities, but the possibility with modern technology and turning all of the AI and so on to advantage, and drones, to be able to actually spot and relieve the pressure on little pockets.
Yeah.
There must be technology fixes which will be high vis, as it
Yeah.
were.
There are, I'm sure, and for a while people were talking about putting little heat detectors on the front of these great big, silage machines, but they go so fast. Curlew chicks are tiny, tiny little things, and would they detect them in time? And yeah, I mean, great, and I would love to go down that road. I just don't know how to do it.
How do the military spot the eggs and collect them?
Oh, well, they know where they are. They have surveys of their land, and they know exactly where the birds are because they're not very big areas. So it's easy to find them. When you've got a massive big field of grass, how do you find one little patch of 4 eggs? And even worse, how do you find 4 little tiny chicks is very, very difficult. So you need to identify where the curlews are nesting from their behavior, know where they're nesting, and then mark them, and then talk to the farmer at hay cutting time or grass cutting time and say, can you go round? Can we? And this is a lot of what the CRP does. How do we compensate you for not cutting that part of the field? Can you delay it? Can we help you find sources of silage so that you don't have to cut that field for a while? All these. Can we give you extra payment to cover for compensation? Blah, blah, all that. But that's all being worked out at the moment. But it's quite complicated, as you can imagine.
Absolutely. Jen?
I wonder if we could get Jeremy Clarkson to champion the curlew with his
does anybody
farm
know
program.
If anybody knows him and would like to introduce me, I would love to talk to him.
We might be able to help.
Oh, well, please, look, tell him I'm great. I love him, think he's marvelous. I really would. I'd love to talk to Jeremy Clarkson because there are curlews left on the Cotswolds, very, very few, very few. But it could be a bird where it is an area where it could be brought back, because I imagine you'd have very sympathetic landowners up there.
Well, I was just thinking the parallel with what the stone curlew recovery on the on the Wiltshire Downs. If our area of Cotswolds could be a ordinary curlew, curlew.
Common curlew. There's nothing common about the curlew. The Eurasian curlew.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, it could. And what a magnificent sight and sound to see curlews flying over the Cotswolds Hills. I mean, how lovely is that? There are a few, but they're not very successful, unfortunately.
I have to say, having been up in the Orkneys this year, kayaking, and hearing clouds of curlews, literally a couple of hundred going off fields, and this cacophony of, well, I can't call it cacophony because it was so beautiful and so moving, but you realise what you're missing and how to get people to be able to hear that, not just the odd one. Just extraordinary.
How do we get people to know that exactly? Because it's disappeared from such large areas, you don't know, you don't miss what you don't know, do you?
Yes.
So, yeah, I agree. So let's get them back singing again and cheering us all up.
Well, one last question for you, which we ask everybody on Voice of the River, to just give us an idea of what's been your most influential book or your most influential movie, getting you into this whole area in the first place.
So I always come back to the very simple and the very lovely What to Look For in Spring, Summer, Autumn and Winter. Do you remember those?
I do.
Beautiful little heart. In fact, I've got any that are very nearby because I love them. Oh, they're on my shelf somewhere and I'd like to see where they are. I should have looked them out beforehand. But I was given them as a child, and the pictures were beautiful, the simple text. I literally walked in my mind. I walked into every page of those books. And what was very important and very useful for me was that they often had people in the pictures. So you had a farmer or somebody hanging out the washing, or you had kids playing or whatever. They folded people into the story. And I thought that was really important. And I think that was very influential for me, because we are part of this picture. We're part of the picture. We're not a problem. We're not the big bad evil people. We're part of nature, and we're part of the solution. And I think seeing those pictures, go back, find some. There's quite a lot around. Get them secondhand and look through them and just think, we can do this. We can live with nature. We really, really, really can.
Thank you so much. Thank you at a very personal level for reminding me of those beautiful books.
Yes.
Thank you. They were part of my absolutely
amazing, aren't they? Yeah.
So, and thank you for really inspirational and informative doesn't begin to touch the sides, but we'd love to take you up on all the connections with not only the events that you're referring to, but also the music and the poetry. I think those sound like, as you say, to try and engage as wide a group as possible. And
Absolutely.
We will very, very much be pushing on the GCSE. I can feel a lobby group starting from our part of the world. Sean Woodcock, look out.
Is there any chance that we could actually do a petition or help support a petition, I think, to the government?
Yes, absolutely. I'll let me send you a big email. So
excellent.
Thank you everybody for listening, and look forward to being in touch again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.